Warm welcome to the session. My name is Mirko Zirker from Seed. I'm head of Asia, and I'm happy to introduce you today to our cash flow forecasting tool. When it comes to kind of cash flow forecasting, as you can see on slide 2, there are basically kind of 5 critical steps which are of importance. And cash flow is a tool which often looks at the whole kind of calendar year, but in order to do this, you should also in particular look at the monthly level, which is a good indicator if you as an enterprise even have quite small scale operations. It might be even interested to block those into weeks, but monthly ones are really helpful. If you are at a kind of really large company, you might even look at kind of quarterly forecasts. But monthly forecasts with a whole annual framework are definitely of help. So in order to do this, it's of critical importance first to understand the market conditions, then to define really the preferred size of operation, to basically scope out also what is kind of the level of production that you're looking at. Once you have done this, you look at the different kind of, you try to understand the impact of your supply chain on this. And then you, of course, need to understand what are the different kind of operating and marketing costs to also fix your components of it. As you might have also already experienced in the earlier lessons, you will see that different considerations are of critical importance, especially understanding your target market. So looking at the demand for your product or service. And in this one, it's very important to understand the different kind of customer segments, to understand what are kind of competitive market issues, are there suppliers or any others which are offering also in your kind of target market the same product, what's the initial price point, understanding what is the value proposition that you offer, what's the willingness to pay from your customer, and what are other kind of competing products and what is their price associated with it. Once you have understood this, you try to develop a kind of compelling go-to-market strategy for the niche that you have identified based on your kind of unique value proposition. And the main idea is this is very important. Understanding your market is of critical kind of importance to estimate what are the kind of potential revenues or the cash that you can kind of generate in order to calculate your cash flow. So with any cash flow analysis, these are kind of the kind of critical important aspects. The second one is you need to actually define what is the size of operations. So to understand what are the sources of cash. This is captured on slide 4, and there are kind of 4 kind of critical business factors which are really important to understand what is the kind of size of operation to calculate this. You need to understand what is actually the minimum size of your operation for the kind of proof of concept with a kind of manageable size of investment. So you need to understand what is kind of sufficient size of kind of production to also have some kind of minimal conclusions about the market acceptance, understanding what are supply chain constraints and what are kind of distribution constraints. Once you have understood this, you will understand what is the really right size of kind of production that helps you on the one hand side to demonstrate that there is a kind of, with this kind of size, you have a kind of proof of concept. So you find enough evidence that the customer is willing to pay for it, that you can also draw kind of some conclusions which are then later on important for scale. And this is something which should be informed by the kind of calculation that you see now on slide 5, where we look in particular understanding monthly business patterns. And these business patterns, depending on maybe you are already have other businesses where you can draw upon, or you have been in business, or you have worked in a similar industry. This is definitely kind of important in this kind of forecasting to actually understand, to try to get a kind of monthly feel at the different kind of production levels that you could provide. It doesn't matter if you're producing any kind of more like organic product, or you're in recycling, or you're making whatever organic coffee or tea, or in any kind of business, you need to understand what is the potential level of production on a monthly basis. And taking this to account, as we show on slide 5, it's important to also look at, there are maybe in certain months of the year, for example, if you're operating in a country where there is Ramadan, to understand that there is maybe 1 month of the year where you only have 50% of the production capacity, or there is a rainy season, or there is any kind of where feedstock might be an issue, or there might be any kind of seasonal issues like holidays, like Christmas breaks, where you naturally would need to assume during these months of the year you go down in the overall kind of production. This is very important to actually look at what is the annual level of the kind of production that you could provide. Also taking really this, because what we have seen quite often when you look at kind of cash flow forecasts, either at annual level or at the monthly level, it's the same from month to month to month. This cannot be true. So you really need to actually put a bit of emphasis understanding what is the difference at the monthly level, what is actually also the kind of capacity of your team. Maybe there are some holidays, maybe there are some other aspects. So looking into those monthly differences is of really kind of critical importance. And this is then kind of also connected to the next slide on slide 6, where we look also connected to the production level, which is at the very end also might be also related to the whole kind of later on the cash disbursements, because based on your kind of production, you also have some different supplies which you need to kind of purchase. So based on this, you will also understand that there are different kind of sales levels, because over the time, as you can see on slide 6, there are maybe different levels of inventories, because you basically try to put all together what is the production level and what is the inventory level and what's the kind of sales level, and how does this all kind of come together, which basically can be helpful to understand how the cash which is going out and the cash is going in is interrelated. This is basically shown on the slide 6. So you try to understand, for example, what we see here in kind of January, where the sales level and the production level is the same. But there are other months where the sales level, the production level, and the inventory level is kind of different. So basically there is a kind of drawdown on inventory, there is maybe a buildup of inventory, which is helpful to understand that you can potentially kind of grow sales over time, because you can have inventory that you can kind of build up on. The cash flow is very much associated with your inventory, with your sales, and with your production. Because at the very end, this happens at different moments in time, and this means that cash is coming in at different moments in time and cash is going out at different moments in time, which often other people would also reference as liquidity. So understanding the monthly business patterns is of crucial importance for your cash flow analysis. And once you have done this, it's important to, in step 4, to also, as we show on slide 7, to define the use of the different cash or cost items. Because at the very end, you might have in the whole kind of activity section of your value chain analysis, you already have understood there are different kind of costs which are associated with the cost of goods sold. This is something which is often kind of related to all the kind of activities of production. But there are also kind of other costs like general and administrative expenses, which are not kind of directly linked to your kind of production, but they are more kind of connected to the creation of your service, which is also others would often kind of calculate also as an overhead, because you have a whole head office which is not maybe always kind of related to your operations, but which is kind of important to get the whole company up and running. And besides this, this is also often not kind of captured in this value chain analysis, or also when you look at your monthly business patterns, understanding your investment costs, because you need to buy maybe machinery, equipment, any kind of land, or any kind of other production sites, or a whole office that you need to kind of expand or build up your operations, which is often referenced as investment costs. So all of this is of critical importance when it comes to your cash flow. When doing this, there's always this kind of rule of thumb: try to look at the kind of big numbers and focus at 80% of the costs. It's difficult, for sure there will be costs which you find difficult to capture. Just focus at 80%, and this will be the ones that will be of most relevance. And once you have done this, you can look actually at your kind of cash flow forecast. So there is kind of important, think about all the kind of cash that you receive and the cash that you disperse. And this is basically the cash flow from operations, or net cash flow from operations. So the cash receipts are all the kind of cash that you're getting from sales, from the revenues at different moments in time. Cash disbursements are your costs which are related maybe to purchasing of raw materials, all the kind of staff, wages, anything related to really the kind of production level, any kind of general administrative expenses, and the investment costs. Once you have done this, then investment costs, of course, understanding also happen at different moments in time. That's a completely other chapter, which is also but important to keep in mind that in 1 year you might have a major investment which only comes once you build a new machinery. You can use this over time, and this might be a big bulk of an investment. Looking at this, also keep always in mind that there will be kind of cost inflation over time. There might be also kind of a price escalation related to it. And with kind of growing production and production efficiency, this might actually happen while the operation matures. So there might be also a difference in terms of your whole kind of cash flow. On the one hand side, that your production will be more efficient, but also cash flow often will become more of an issue, where other people reference it as working capital. Once you want to scale from producing 50 units to 1,000 units, this is the moment where you maybe have a lot of kind of money which goes out for buying some raw materials, and it takes you only 2-3 months later you will get the money back. This is the working capital that often people are struggling with. So scale is a critical point also in the kind of cash flow analysis, which you always need to take into account. But once you do this, there is a rule of thumb: if the 3-year cash flow is not positive, or it doesn't increase really over time, and there is no kind of significant cumulative increase over time to the initial capital investment, then you need to go back to your value proposition. It then most probably in a way fails, or you actually haven't done your whole kind of target market analysis, your price setting is actually not right. So this is, I think, of very critical importance. Cash flow analysis is a critical tool to run a business. So look at all these kind of aspects, look at actually monthly business patterns, look at the really size of production which is necessary to prove it, and look at your target market. And with having done all of this, you should be in a kind of good position to calculate your forecast and then to demonstrate also the value of your business. All the best with this, and really looking forward to feedback also on this session. Thank you.